This is Matthew, author, artist, and commentator. I run luminousbeings.blog, where you can find all my articles, stories, drawings, and podcasts. Welcome to King of Hearts, Queen of Sorrows, Reflections on Mobile Fighter G Gundam. My name is Matthew, I am your host, and this is my platform to discuss one of my favorite anime of all time, Mobile Fighter G Gundam. I'm trying something new. I thought I'd add a little bit of production value to the show with a little bit of smooth jazz. This one is by D. Yankee that I found on Free Music Archive, and it's called Rain, appropriately. Now I'm going to go ahead and toss it to myself from a couple weeks ago. And Mobile Fighter G Gundam. Today I'm going to be talking about episode 9, which is called Chapman's Heroic Something or Other in English. And it has to do with Domon and Rain going to Neo England to fight, or to London to fight Neo England's champion, previous 3-time consecutive champion. So that means this man fought over a 12-year span 3 times in a row, and won and kept on winning. Anyway, that was a while ago. The guy's name is Noble Chapman. He may be married to a French woman. Her name is Manon. And Rain's voice actress in the dub makes sure to say it in a French-ish accent, which I appreciate. I think this is stupid, but when someone's name is in a different language, I think it's nice, or it's best practices to try to pronounce it as close to that language as possible. Anyway, I don't know. I'm going off on that tangent. This is going to be another episode where I pretty much break from the previous formula as I keep tweaking the show and how I do it, when I do it, where I do it. So, here we go. This episode, I would say there's a lot of focus on Manon and on Noble Chapman himself. Noble's just a funny name as a given name. Chapman is a family name, it's fine. It's just like, so this is a noble chap. What are we going to call him, writing staff of Mobile Fighter G Gundam? How about Noble Chapman? He's a man who's a chap, and he's noble, or at least he was. So that's a good name for him. Regardless, this episode's a lot about them, and the very last words at the end of the episode, again, or maybe Manon says the last thing, but the last thing Domon says is the fate of a warrior. And there's a lot of talk about, because Noble is such an old Gundam fighter, he's probably in his 60s or maybe 60, it's hard to tell in anime. His wife is still very youthful looking, with her fiery red hair and no sign of wrinkles or anything, and they put a little bit of like a wrinkled aged look on Noble himself, and he's got graying hair and stuff, and he calls Domon lad, and he's saying, oh man, this guy's a kid, and I can't believe, just a kid can be a mobile fighter, things have really changed, or Gundam Fight or whatever, things have really changed since my day, and it's really hard to tell how old he is, and how, when was Neo England the, reigning over all of space and whatnot. Was that, 8 years ago, 20 years ago? I'm not sure how long ago it was. But there's a couple things at play here. There's kind of the relationship between a warrior and his woman, or the people or person supporting him particularly, or maybe the other way around even, it could be. If it was, it happens to be though that, Manon is the reign to Noble's Domon. I think I said that properly. And, except, there's cheating involved. And they're actually married and whatnot, as opposed to just, Rain being along for the ride with Domon. In I think the last episode, I was really curious about people's ages. I think I'm going to look everyone's ages up, and I'm going to probably do a little offhand remarks on that, if I can find the ages reliably and soon, and I'll link that in the description for this episode. But anyway, it talks about that warrior and the person supporting him, or them, relationship. And it's kind of about ageism, and it's about this warrior's fate. And while Domon and Noble are having their fight, he's going on about how the stronger a warrior becomes, the more entrenched in the life of fighting he becomes, and the more he has to just stay in it for as long as possible to keep fighting and winning to be a hero and a champion for, you know, his nation or whatever. And again, you know, last episode I talked for a long time about all the nonlinear parallels between the different characters and how they kind of line up with Domon and Rain and what that all means for their story. And I think again here, it's pretty clear that there's non-linear paralleling of their lives. So Domon is so young. He's fighting for his country in that he's been coerced to do it in order to save his father and stuff. We don't know Noble's original intention for fighting for Neo England. Maybe it was patriotism, who knows? But he basically, you know, made the case to Domon that after he fought and won, and the stronger he got, the more entrenched in it he became, and the more he had to keep fighting. And he couldn't stop fighting. He didn't feel like he could stop fighting until he was no longer physically able to fight. So he basically, like, wanted to die inside his mobile, you know, inside of his Gundam. And, you know, that's kind of sad and scary. And Domon, like, things aren't that clear for him just yet, but I bet that he can kind of relate to that feeling of being trapped. I mean, we had Birdman back in the Neo-Russia episode tell him that, you know, Earth is a prison for all of them. And Domon really seems stricken by that sentiment or that statement from Birdman. And then Noble telling him that basically the stronger you get, which he needs to become stronger in order to do what he has to do, the stronger you get, the more entrenched in this life you become. And basically that he's going to be stuck doing this till he dies. That's kind of the sad story that Noble's putting out there for him. And another interesting note, just kind of foreshadowing the future, is Noble is having issues with the brain, the like neural stimulants that he's taking, and he's like just popping these things like candy in a ridiculous, like a really scary way to see. And there's a whole thing about how George kind of wants to save him from himself too, which I'll circle back to in a little bit. But anyway, Domon hesitates and he won't attack Noble, and Noble's yelling at him, screaming for him to defeat him. And I almost think Noble was so desperate at that point to be done with the life of a Gundam fighter. Like he wanted to hold on to it for as long as he could, but pushing himself to his limits, past his limits, and especially with the stimulants, you know, damaging him, I think that really showed him that he was done with this life. And so he's desperate for Domon to attack him and, you know, disqualify Royal Gundam so that he can no longer fight. And just, that's fascinating to me, that the guy's, you know, talks about like how he's begrudgingly in this warrior's life, but on the other side of it, like, he doesn't know any other way to live. So the only way he can't just stop being a Gundam fighter because he wants to. He feels like he needs to push himself and push himself and push himself, and then finally, when he can't take it anymore, he can't even gracefully bow out. He needs to be defeated, disqualified, and totally, I guess, ruined in a way. And like, that's really sad. This episode got me really emotional, but I have other things to talk about, so I will continue with those in a bit. Hey there, I'm back, and I'm going to let you know something that you probably wouldn't know or wouldn't have known had I not said it, but I am back like 7 hours later, probably. Anyway, so, talking about Noble Chapman, I covered him pretty much. Right now I want to talk about Manon and how interesting a character she was. She appears to have been his card dealer at the game where Domon caught her cheating, or caught them cheating together. And obviously that, you know, foreshadows the fact, and it's actually bookended, or not bookended, it's preceded by us seeing George being defeated by all the dummies and by Noble himself. And it's through the use of dummies and the fog, and George can't see and whatever, and then the accusations get made against him. But it turns out Manon was the one who was generating the fog and sending out the dummies, and she did it because she committed to this man, and she committed to the fact that this man was committed to being a fighter for the rest of his life. And she feels like it's a burden that she has to bear, that she has to enable him to be the kind of Gundam fighter, or be the kind of man he thinks he needs to be, who is a proud Gundam fighter who will heroically fight until he gives up his last breath in the cockpit of his Gundam. And that really struck me as beautiful and tragic, and I'm not one of these people. Well, anyway, it just kind of struck me as beautiful and tragic. And it's interesting because she pretty much calls out Rain and says like, oh, hey, lady, you're in the same position as me. This is a tough life you've chosen as a woman and as a partner. And I think as a woman, she means, someone who's going to fall in love with this guy, this Yahoo, who, he may have all these good qualities, but, one of them is that he's going to be this fighter and he's not going to stop fighting. So basically, if you're, committed to this man, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. So that's I don't know, it's kind of a sad thought. And it's interesting that she chose to cheat for him to help him out. She wanted to keep it a secret, but he knew all along that she was helping him. So there's that. And then I think one of the stronger things about her was how she tells everybody at the end of the episode that you can avoid this fate. Like, this doesn't have to be how your lives end, in desperation and deceit and dishonor. And really, it's ironic. She chose to deceive the man she loved, chose to deceive and cheat the mobile fighter, or the other Gundam fighters who were coming to challenge him. And I wouldn't be surprised if her aversion to him fighting, or her insistence that he not fight, was equal parts her concern for him with the simulants and all that, and also that she had to go to that command center and hurry up and set everything up to his advantage so that he can continue winning and continue fighting. And I just think that's interesting, because it's almost like a self-concern. It's almost a selfish selflessness, or maybe the other way around. And it's a really interesting play on that sort of character, because she is doing all these negative things, all these immoral things, in order to stay true to her man, basically, and to honor the sort of life he wants to lead. And I guess the biggest shame of it all is that he had originally wanted to live a life of honor. And I'll get back to George now. George claimed that he grew up knowing of Gentle Chapman's honor and courage, and as a fighter and as a knight, serving his country, and that he very much wanted to replicate what he saw in Noble Chapman. And these are laudable qualities that made Chapman lovely to George. I'm sure his honor and tenacity made him lovely to Manon as well. I gather that Manon is French, and I think it's kind of funny that you've got two French redheads who have such high esteem, and two French redheads who have such high esteem for Noble Chapman, and one of them is like enabling him to keep doing what he's doing, be a cheater, potentially hurt himself with the performance enhancing, mental acuity enhancing drugs, and the other is pulling on him the other way, trying to undo the work that Manon had done to enable him to win dishonorably, and trying to bring him back to honor. And I think that's a really interesting dichotomy. I'm not really sure where that one can go, but I thought I'd just point that out. Anyway, let's see what else. I really like that George wanted to kind of save Chapman's soul, and it's kind of like the worst thing about it wasn't that he was beaten or roughed up. It was that this great gentleman warrior had fallen and become disgraced. Again, this episode, since I'm straying from formula so heavily, I'll just keep up that trend and kind of blow into a wrap-up here. And I'll share a thing that was lost in translation. For some reason, Noble Chapman's Gundam is called not Royal Gundam in the Japanese, like it is in the dub, but John Bull Gundam. I have no idea what that means. What is a John Bull? Who's John Bull? I don't know. I don't know much about history, so maybe there's some figure there. And I'm planning on doing an offhand remarks where I talk about the little things like that, and little nuggets of stuff from G Gundam that I wanted to research. So you can expect to see that up at some point over on the YouTube channel, the Recipher channel. So anyway, I'll provide a link when at the relevant time. But yeah, so John Bull Gun, kind of interesting. Don't know what that means, but whatever. I thought the fog machines that Manon has set up look kind of like something from Nazca, Valley of the Wind, which is kind of funny. Just they look so odd. And Domon and Rain question what they are. Also, I thought it was really funny that Rain knew exactly what like a mental enhancement drug tasted or was, but just by tasting a little bit of the residue that she'd swiped from Noble Chapman. Just kind of a last thought. One of the most profound things in this episode was that Noble chided Domon about treating his life like it's a game, like it's something that can be thrown away, and or that it can be played with. And I think that's pretty interesting. It's a little ironic because the guy was basically condemning himself to die fighting, and he like kind of lamented that for Domon, that Domon would be willing to fall into that same trap. And again, this being the acceptance arc, maybe Manon was trying to get Rain to accept that she could end up like her, stuck with this guy like to the bitter end. It looks at the end of the episode like Chapman is going to die. I don't know that that's true at this point. I mean, it really looks like it, but I think they would have said something had he, been dying there. But man, it sure felt sad and dramatic, and really, it is a sad situation. So maybe that they just decided to let him live, but keep it on that really downbeat because of how tragic the whole set of circumstances was. But it's almost like she's trying to tell that, and then she gives them the warning about making sure they don't let their lives be consumed by the fighting, which I think is a good lesson for all of us. And yeah, I don't know is Domon in danger of losing himself to the fight against the Dark Gundam? Maybe that's what this is about. Not sure. But that's really all I have to say. I have kind of been wanting to use this episode as a jumping point to talk about like how G Gundam regards men and women, and like their roles and everything. But I think I'll leave that to a later date, and I'll kind of just put a pin in that and call back to it in a later episode, or maybe just on the shadow front when I'm talking about all these things at once. So anyway, that's all I have to say for now. So folks, why don't you go on out there and grasp happiness. That outro track is also D Yankee, a song called In G Minor Mood. Thought that was kind of funny. I think it's a cool song. Thank you for your time and attention. I'd love to do more of this. Like, share, and subscribe to cheer me on, or give me feedback to make me stronger and smarter. Visit luminousbeings.blog for more. I link everything I do there, so if you want to comment, that's the place where I'll definitely see it.